methods and breaks them down into easy to understand and implement practices. His focus is on identifying 4 characters that are basic in all stories: the victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide. And all of us throughout our lives play those different roles. So, as Chris in the introduction said, my goal is to impact and make a positive difference using my experience in the world. The title of my story is The Over 50 Founder. Over my career, I've been successful and had some very interesting positions, and the path hasn't been simple or straightforward. It's actually been, some things have been sad, some things have been good. Early in my career, I was corporate controller for Cray Computer Corporation. That was a publicly traded company, and one of the founders was Seymour Cray. They made supercomputers. This was a publicly traded company, and as corporate controller, I had a big job to do. Unfortunately, the company went through bankruptcy, and because it was public, the whole world knew about it. The night before we made the announcement, my heart was broken because this dream was going to go away, bankruptcy, and I had to be the hero. I was responsible with my team for getting the paychecks ready for the next morning and keeping it a secret to everybody because of the SEC requirements. And so we worked through the night, got the payroll ran and ready for the next morning so that when people came in the next morning, they would be given their final paycheck. They weren't given notice, they weren't given severance, and it was a shock to everybody. I was the hero that day because I had to stay focused, do what was required to make sure people got paid, and then overcome my own disappointment and sadness. After that, I also had to find a job like everyone else. So a couple of years later, Seymour called me up and said, I want to offer you this position as Chief Financial Officer for my company, SRC Computers. I was thrilled. It was great to be, I've been commuting to Denver. It was great to be back in the Springs, working with Seymour and this team of engineers. I was so excited. I'd given notice to my job in Denver, and just a few days before I was to start, Seymour was tragically killed in an automobile accident. So what do? Fortunately for the company, he had brought in some investors, so the company was able to continue. And I stayed there a few years. I went on after that and worked for Hewlett-Packard Company, where I was hired in as a leader of the global financial services, mergers and acquisitions integration program for finance and accounting operations around the world. I loved that job. I learned a lot. Unfortunately, that job was moved offshore. And again, I had to find another position. When you're looking for a position, you can fall into the role of being the victim. But fortunately, I have a hero characteristic of I love a challenge. So I went after the challenge, and I fortunately landed on my feet and found another job in Colorado Springs. I went to work for Wells Fargo Company. I was responsible for consolidating finance operations into Minnesota and Minneapolis and Colorado Springs. And in that role, I eliminated people's jobs. I was the villain. That was a tough one. Fortunately, I moved on to another job, and well, actually, I started looking for other jobs. I applied for 700 positions. You heard me right, 700 jobs. I barely got a nibble. And finally, the day came, I interviewed for a chief financial officer position with a company. And I interviewed with the executive team, the board of directors. That's how I was waiting to hear back. And I heard, no, you don't get the job. I was not the victim. It was at that moment, I was so excited because now I could do what I wanted to do. I could be the guide. And that's when I made the decision to found my own company. I was so excited about that, and still am, to be able to make a difference in people's lives. So we all have a story to tell, and I want to leave you with a quote And I'll close with this quote from Steve Jobs: "The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation that is coming." What is your story? Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.